Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining my presentation on SAS Global Forum 2021. My name is Yulia Bahatska, and I'm a statistical programmer analyst at Roche. I have 9 years of experience in statistical programming for clinical trials using SAS. I'm also an active use member and a poster stream co-chair since 2019. Today, we're going to talk about analyzing data missing due to COVID-19 in ongoing studies, and I will walk you through the process of data transformation from raw data to ADAM and beyond. To start with, I would like to give you a brief overview of the study I'm currently working on. I will show you which analyses have been requested to assess the impact of COVID-19 on the study. I will walk you through the process of data transformation from raw data to SDTM and from SDTM to ADAM. And in the end, I will give a short demo of the Shiny app that we created. Let's start with a brief study overview. The study I'm currently working on is a phase 3 randomized double-controlled, double-blind clinical study to evaluate efficacy, safety, PK, and biomarker effects of intrathecally administered tominersen in patients with manifest Huntington disease. What you should remember from this slide is that the study duration is approximately 2 years, and the primary efficacy endpoint is the absolute change from baseline in cUHDRS at week 101 and in TFC also at week 101. Here we can see which changes have been made to study conduct. So, for example, missed visits were replaced with phone calls or video calls, and their primary focus was to collect the adverse events and concomitant medications. Also, several outcome measures such as functional assessment, total functional capacity, Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale, Clinical Global Impression, and Huntington's Daily Disease Activity Scale have been collected remotely. The analyses that have been requested focused on missed visits due to COVID-19 related reasons, missed doses due to COVID-19 related reasons, missed cUHDRS and its component, and the summary of the duration of not being treated due to any COVID-19 reasons. Also, the remote visits have been in focus. Here we can see the entire process overview. We started with the raw data, which contained visit eCRF form from RAVE and CTMS data for protocol deviations. Based on this, we created VE SDTM domain, which stands for visit events, and this is a domain that is recommended by CDISC for ongoing studies affected by COVID-19. Using VE and some other SDTM domains, we created an ADAM dataset ADMS, which stands for Missed Assessments Analysis Dataset. This dataset already contained all the parameters required for our analysis. And the analysis itself included static outputs and an RShiny app, which was further shared with our stakeholders. Here we can see an overview of VE domain. So using this domain, we can see whether the visit was an on-site or a virtual or remote visit, whether it was a planned or unscheduled visit, whether it was pre-specified or not, whether it occurred or not. And on the right side, we can also see 3 additional variables one can add to their VE domain. For our study purposes, we decided only to add one of them, the indicator whether or not the visit has been affected by the pandemic. Protocol deviations were recorded in CTMS, and the sites were instructed to start the description of the deviation with COVID-19 if the deviation was related to COVID. This later helped us to assess whether or not the deviation has been related to COVID. Afterwards, we combined this with the visit eCRF form, and if at a given visit there was a deviation related to COVID-19, we flagged it as pandemic-related. Here we can see how the visit form from RAVE was handled. First, we wanted to see whether or not the visit occurred. So if the visit was marked as done in RAVE, we assumed that the visit occurred and assigned V occurred to yes. If the visit was marked as not done in RAVE, we wanted to see whether remote data was available or not. So if remote data was available, we assumed that the visit was remote and assigned V occurred to yes and V decode to remote visit. If there was no remote data available, we assumed that the visit did not occur and assigned VE occurred to no. ADMS, or Missed Assessments Analysis Dataset, consists of 3 types of parameters: expected parameters, completed parameters, and duration of dosing missed due to COVID-19. Expected parameters were created for visit, dose, and each of the UHDRS components. So based on the assessment schedule and subject study status, we created records for assessments that were expected for the subject. If the assessment was not expected, we populated the reason why it was not expected in reason not done variable. This could be COVID-19 or any other reason. If the date of assessment was not available, we derived the planned date, PDT, which was based on the date of day 1 visit from SV domain and planned day of visit from TV domain. For all records where the parameter was expected, we also indicated whether or not the assessment was performed, and if not, we populated the reason in reason not done variable. Then we calculated the duration of dosing missed due to COVID-19, which was difference in days between the date of the last dose prior to the dose missed due to COVID-19 and the date when the dosing was resumed. Here you can finally see some SAS code. So to start with, we created a dataset called expected visits from TV and ADSL, which contained all the potentially expected visits for all the study subjects based on the TV domain. For specific study endpoints, we needed to subset this dataset based on the protocol schedule. Then we derived the date of day 1 visit and actual date of visit or planned date of visit. So for the visits that occurred, we were able to derive the actual date of visits, and for the visits that did not occur, we derived the planned date. Then we looked whether the planned date was in the future, and this meant that the visit was not reached and is not expected, so therefore we populated the analysis value as 0, which indicated that the visit was not expected, and the analysis reason not done, visit not reached. If the planned date of visit was after the study discontinuation date, then it was obvious that the visit will never occur, so we also populated the analysis value with 0, and the reason not done with the study discontinuation reason. Otherwise, we assumed that the visit was expected. Later, we applied the same logic for study-specific endpoints, such as UHDRS. On this slide, you can see the logic we used for the completed parameters. So first, we needed to check whether the value was available in the actual data. If yes, then we set analysis value to 1. If no, then we checked whether or not the visit was affected by the pandemic. And if the visit was affected by the pandemic, we set the analysis value to 0 and the reason not done to COVID-19. If the visit was not affected by the pandemic, we set analysis value to 0 and the reason not done to the respective reason. If there was no reason available, we used the not specified value. On this slide, you can see the example of IDMS domain for an ongoing subject. So here you can see visit overall expected parameters and visit overall completed parameters. We can see that the subject has several completed visits and several visits that are not expected because they are not reached yet. On this example, we can see the subject who discontinued the study, and here we're looking at the dosing. So we can see that before study discontinuation, the doses were expected, and after the study discontinuation, the doses are not expected, and the reason is populated as the reason why the subject discontinued the study, which is withdrawal by subject. Then we move to the completed parameters, and we can see that the subject had 3 doses here, and then for some reason, which we don't know, which we don't have in our data, the dose was not completed. So here we have the not specified, and we have derived the planned date. Let's now move to the duration of dosing missed due to COVID-19. Here we can see 3 possible scenarios. The first subject has missed 1 dose due to COVID-19. The second one has missed in total 4 doses, but only the third and the second one were missed due to COVID-19, and the first and the fourth one were missed due to other reasons. The third subject missed 2 doses, but then never resumed treatment. So how do you want to handle these subjects? For the first subject, we want to calculate the difference between 19th of May and the 28th of January, so between the date when the dosing was resumed and between the date of the last dose before the missed dose due to COVID-19. For the second subject, we want to calculate the difference between the 11th of August and 19th of February. So this dose was the dose missed due to other reason, and this dose was the last dose that was supposed to happen before the dosing was missed due to COVID-19. The third subject never resumed treatment, so we want to calculate the difference between the end of study date and the date of the last dose before the dosing was missed due to COVID-19. Here is the code that prepares the data for the derivation of duration of dosing missed due to COVID-19. As input, we take a subset of the dataset with those completed parameters to only the subjects who have at least 1 dose missed due to COVID-19. Then, using the log function, for each record, we derive the analysis reason not done and the date that combines analysis date and planned date from the previous record. And then we can proceed to the derivation of the duration of the intervals of dosing missed due to COVID-19. Let's define the start of the interval of dosing missed due to COVID-19. Let's take a look at the subject on the slide. This subject has only missed 1 dose due to COVID-19, so the start of the interval would be the 28th of January, which is the last dose prior to the dose missed due to COVID-19. And the general rule here would be that if at the given visit, the dose was missed due to COVID-19, but the previous dose was not missed due to COVID-19, we identify it as the start of the interval and assign to it the date of the dose prior to the one missed due to COVID-19. Now let's proceed to the stop of the interval of missed dosing. Let's take a look at these two subjects. So for this subject, this would be the 19th of May, so the date when the dosing was resumed. And for the second subject, this would be the 13th of October, the date of the dose that was missed due to other reason than COVID-19. And the general rule here would be that if the previous reason was not COVID-19 and the current reason is not COVID-19, regardless of whether or not the dose was administered, we assign this as an end of the interval. Finally, if the dosing was never resumed, we output it in the separate dataset, which we call not resumed, and treat separately. Now we can proceed to the final step of our derivations. So for all the intervals, we take the last record per interval and then calculate its duration. So here, if the dosing was resumed, we use the combination of analysis and plan date and the start of the interval date. If the dosing was not resumed, we use either the end of study date or, if subject is still in study, the today's date, as you can see in the code here. Then, as the subject can have multiple intervals, we need to sum up all the intervals of missed dosing by subject, and this is done by ProcSQL here. And on this slide, you can see the final result, where the subject has dose expected parameters, dose completed parameters, and since subject has 2 doses missed due to COVID-19, the duration of dosing missed due to COVID-19. So, what's next? Once our ADMS was ready, we were able to proceed to the analysis itself. The first part were the static outputs, which included frequency tables for the doses and visits missed due to COVID-19 and also other assessments, and also the descriptive tables for the data collected remotely. The second part was the multiple imputation, and ADMS has proved to be quite helpful with that, because in order to determine the type of imputation, we needed to know the reason for the value being missing. And last but not least, we also created a Shiny app in order to enable our stakeholders to constantly monitor the impact of COVID-19 on our data. I have included this into my presentation in order to show that in the modern world, it's not enough to just go by using one programming language. And in order to get a better understanding of our data, we need to use all instruments available to us. So now let's take a look at the app itself. There are quite some tabs in this app, but we will only concentrate on these two because they give us the most information. On the left side, we can choose between visits and doses and also some other variables. On the right side, we see the dataset that we have been using and also filter them if needed and get some information about the dataset, such as number of observations. So here we can see number of doses expected and completed, and we can see that at week 29 and 37, there is a quite significant difference between the expected doses and completed doses. The percentage of doses received figure also confirms this, as at week 29 and 37, the percentage is quite low compared to the other visits here. This is closer to the today's date, and we don't have the complete information, so this information is not really reliable. On this figure, we can see the reasons why the drug has not been administered. So we can navigate between the reasons to see which ones we want to include. We have COVID-19, adverse events, drug holiday, unknown, and other reasons. And this gives us quite a comprehensive overview of why the doses were missed. Here, we can also take a look at the missed doses or visits per dates in case we're interested in a particular time interval. We can select between the date we want to see. We can choose actual or planned, or the combination of both, which gives us the most comprehensive overview. So here we can also select some grouping parameters. So for this example, I selected grouping by region, and I chose Europe as a subgroup here. So again, we can see the first wave of the pandemic in April and May. And in this figure, we can also see that the number of doses received in Europe was much lower in March, April, and May. So this is when the pandemic started. For our study, we decided not to amend the study protocol and continue the study as before because COVID-19 impact was not considered to significantly affect the study results. In general, I would like to say that the structure we chose for our analysis dataset has proved very helpful, and it also allows for further parameters to be added if we would be interested in some further data. Also, the combination of analysis and plan date variables enabled us to look at the specific time interval, like first wave, second wave, etc. If you decide to go this way with your study, there are several points you need to consider. You would need to do quite some data cleaning because data issues can significantly impact your results in programming, especially for ongoing studies. Also, your code might need to be adapted in case you have a more complicated study design. So for example, for my presentation, I showed the simplified version of the code. We also had a safety follow-up and several visits were expected after treatment discontinuation, and therefore several assessments were also expected. I have presented only one way of dealing with missing data due to COVID-19, but there are also other ways which might be more applicable for other studies. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation. Unfortunately, it was online, and hopefully next year we will be able to meet face-to-face. I would be happy to answer any questions.